Okay, so our next code optimization tip is to avoid multiple API call or database access in a single event. Okay, because if ever we are going to have a multiple API call in a single event or a database access in a single event, it could actually affect the speed or the performance of our application. Okay, so for example, we have in our code is we have this one here. Okay, during page load, because in this use effect, this is actually on page load because as you can see, we have in our dependency list, we have no, it is empty. Okay, so therefore this is during page load. So when we are going to have the get contacts, it is going to retrieve the records from the database. So it is going to call contacts.php, then contact the database, and update our uh, contacts list. So after this operation is done, next is get groups. Okay, I think it's get groups. Okay, so I have this one here. Get groups still going to access the API, then connect to the database, and it is going to update our groups list. Okay, so far as you have observed, it's still fine. Okay, you cannot see actually the effect on the performance of our application because we are only dealing with less than 20 records, and we are still on the local host. Okay, but if ever we're going to deal with thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands and worse, millions of records, and we are going to deploy our application into or online, so you could see there or you could feel uh, the effect on the performance of our application. So take note, we are on the page load. Okay, so it would take a long time if ever we're going to do it this way. Okay, and how much more if ever we're going to have some more methods or functions that is going to still connect to the database. For example, we have 5 uh, function calls to an API, so it would really affect the speed or the performance of our application. In this case, during page load. Okay, so what are we going to do here is we are just going to, instead that we are going to call or contact or call an API 2 times during page load, we're just going to call one API call. Okay, so I'm going to call it get records. Okay. Okay, on our get records, we are going to get or retrieve both the contacts and the groups at once. Okay, so what will happen is that I'm going to comment this out. Then I'm going to have here get records. Okay, so instead of multiple call, so we are now have a single call to our get records. Okay, but then so before we're going to continue with this, I'm going to have first our API. Okay, so I have created here utilities. Okay, just call it our DB utilities or whatever. Okay, I'm going to copy my template. Then I'm going to paste it here. Whoops. Template. Okay. Now I'm just going to call it utilities. Okay. So I'm going to have here get contacts. I'm just going to call it get contacts and groups. Okay, so meaning uh, we are just going to use a single function, okay, to return to our we're going to have here JSON encode. Then later on, we're going to have our return value. Okay. So this will be the function that is going to facilitate the retrieval of the contacts and groups. Okay. But take note, we already have our get contacts here, so I'm just going to copy my get contacts. Okay, we're just going to need our user ID. So I'm going to connect at once. Okay, so I'm going to remove those. Okay, so I'm going to have the connection here include connection.pdo.php. Okay, so we have now here our connection, so that I'm just going to pass here my connection. I'm just going to call it my connection. Okay, so I'm going to use my con. Okay, and we also need our user ID. Okay, so that instead that I'm going to have here our JSON, I'm just going to use now my user ID. Okay, I think that's all. Now, by the way, I am not going to encode this one into JSON. Just because we are going to encode only when we are going to return to the calling function or application. So take note, our front end is going to call this function, not this function here. Okay, and from this function, it is going to call then this function. Okay. Okay, so that's for get contacts. Then I'm going to get. Okay, so we have here our get groups. Okay, so I don't need the connection anymore. Then I'm not going to encode it in JSON format. Then I'm going to have. Okay, I'm just going to change. Actually, we could still use con, but then I'm just going to have my con so that it is more readable, so you will not be confused about the con here and the con in these functions. Okay, so after we have, okay, I think because we are going to call them all. Okay, so next is we are going to call, okay, get groups and get contacts here. Okay, so I'm going to have the return value is equal to. Now I'm going to use here the array function. Okay, so because we are going to return this one here as an array. Okay, both the groups and the contacts. Okay, so I'm going to have here get contacts. Then it needs connection and the user ID. Okay, so I have here con. It is because con is actually instantiated into this connection pdo.php and the user ID. By the way, the user ID would be coming from the JSON. Okay, so that's why here we're going to have JSON is equal to JSON decode, then JSON comma true. Okay, so that here we are going to send JSON, then we have the user ID. Because the user ID variable or value is actually coming from the calling application, which is the front end. Okay? So we have here, we are going to pass later on this one as an array. So I'm going to, since I'm going to have this as a name parameter, so we have contacts. Okay, so therefore we are going to return this one as contacts, then the values. Okay, then comma, we have the other one, we have the groups. Okay, so here the get groups. Okay, I don't need the JSON, only the connection object. Oops. Get groups, then con and end. Then return. Okay. Okay, so as you can see here, the external application is going to call get contacts groups. Then from within get contacts groups, it is going to call each of these functions. Then we have here operation should be get contacts groups. Get contacts groups. Oops. Okay, I have an error. Function undefined. Oh. Because when you are going to call a function within the class, okay, we are going to use this, means within this class. Okay. So I'm going to try with this one here. Contacts.api, then utilities.php. Okay, we're just going to use get. Okay, for the parameters we have operation, then get contacts groups, and for our JSON, so we're going to have user ID. We're going to have one. Okay, send. Oops. Line 20. Oh, should be mycon. Save. Okay, so you could see here now contacts. Okay, then we have set of contacts. Okay, for user ID 1 and groups. Then we have here our groups. Okay, so we have now successfully created our API that is going to return both the contacts and groups at once. Okay, so from here in our get records. So I'm just going to copy. Okay. So instead that we're going to have the groups.php, is we're going to have utilities.php. Then we need our JSON data. So I'm going to copy. Okay, so we are going to have our user ID and user ID. So operation is get contacts groups, then await, so it should be async. Oh, so since it is get, okay, I'm going config. Um, so we're just going to have our JSON, since we are going to have a single value here. JSON that stringify JSON data. So we're not going to use the form data, by the way, since this is a get contacts groups. I think that's it. But then I'm just going to have console.log then response.data. Okay, get records. Then it is going to call utilities with our JSON data, user ID, and so on. Oh, JSON data. Save. Okay, so you could see here contacts and groups. Okay, so therefore it returns the contacts with these contacts here and the groups with our groups. So we can see here the name of the array. The first array is we have contacts, then we have the groups. Okay, so we don't have any records yet. It is because we have not yet updated our contacts list. So how are we going to access oops. Okay, so we have here contacts and groups. Okay, so and all of them are in our response.data. They belong to our response.data. Okay, so first array and we have our second array. Okay, so response.data contacts is the first. Okay, or actually we could just dot contacts. Okay, and we're going to have our groups. Okay, set groups list, then response.data.groups semicolon. Save. Okay, I think that's all. Okay, so we're going to try. Oops, wait. Oops, we have an error. Wait. So response that data that contacts. Okay, so we have the contact, so I'm just going to try it here. Not zero. Oh. Set contacts list. I think that's it. Okay, so we have it there. My error is both of them are set groups list. Okay, so that is why we have not updated our contacts list. So take note here that the returned values could be accessed as like this one. Okay, so as you can see, instead of having two function calls, we are calling now a single function. And by the way, I think get groups is not needed anymore. Okay, so we could, since it is used only once, I could just uh, comment this out. Now I'm not going to comment out get contacts because later on get contacts function is still going to be used to refresh our display. Okay, so we have only this one here as the new code from our previous video. Okay, so that's all for this video. I'll see you on the next one.